Hello. Hi. I don't see any of my folks that have signed up, so I might just go ahead and do the workshop so we have the recording um, that I can send you. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead with our topic that we have planned today. Let's see. Mhm. Okay. So, you left religion, and why are you not okay yet? And that can look differently for a lot of people. But for most of us, it looks a lot like burnout, especially neurodivergent people. So I'm going to start with my story. A few years. So I've been out. I grew up in Mormonism, and I'm several years out of the church now, and not too long ago, a few years after leaving the church, I got a phone call from a hospital billing department. The woman on the other end was professional and kind, even. And she said, "We sent you a refund check for $1,100 back in March. It's expired now, so we're cutting you a new one. Could you please watch for it this time and cash it this time?" She said, right? So I thanked her and I hung up and turned to look at the giant pile of mail in my kitchen on the counter that almost reached the cabinet above, the pile that I had been avoiding for months, and the pile that made my chest tighten every time I walked past it. And apparently, the pile that contained $1,100 that I had already earned. So, sitting there in an envelope somewhere that I had never opened and didn't know about, and it was expired now. So, the shame of that moment for me was not a small, just oops, I lost some mail, I lost a check. It was a kind of shame that makes you stop and think, what is wrong with me? Because I had done the hard part, right? I had left the church. I had processed everything. I had rebuilt my beliefs, and I still could not open my mail. So if you're here, I'm guessing you know that feeling or something like it, not necessarily a mail pile, but something. The decision that you can't make, a routine that you can't build, the sense that your life should feel more like yours by now, but it doesn't. Um, so today I want to give you an explanation that nobody gave me. And this is not to fix everything. And it's not necessarily a specific plan, but an explanation. Because when something finally makes sense, the shame loosens. And that's the first step to making any kind of change. So there's a script for what happens when you first leave a high control system, right? Um, you process the grief, you work through the anger, you deconstruct, and then we expect that life gets better because we have freedom now, right? Sometimes that's true. But there's a stage that script skips, and that's a stage where everything has settled and life is supposed to feel normal again, but it doesn't. People who used to manage everything, callings, families, getting to church on Sunday, all shiny, feeding the missionaries, right? Now you find yourself frozen in front of something simple, like for me, the mail, or, you know, um, whatever, like an email you can't send, or, feeling like things are out of whack with your work, or whatever the thing is for you. So, it's really easy to interpret that as failure. That seems like it makes sense, but, I should be farther along. Why is this so hard for me? But what if that is not what is happening? What if the difficulty is not failure, but evidence that something real was removed and something new hasn't formed yet? The church was not just giving you beliefs, it was running your operating system. It organized your time, it answered your decisions, it defined what mattered, and carried an enormous amount of cognitive load. When it disappears, that load doesn't disappear with it, it becomes yours. That's initiation, planning, follow through. Those were all externally supported in the church. Now they are internal. Um, as far as your nervous system is concerned, after growing up in that situation, approval equals safety, and certainty equals safety. And those were signals that were always there. Those are now gone. And that silence feels like a threat. Responsibility moved from outside of you to inside of you. And that capacity builds very slowly. Most people can understand everything I just said. You can explain it, you can see it, but then that doesn't change anything, right? Not because the explanation is wrong, but because this is where people try to apply it alone. Understanding helps, but it's not the same as knowing what to do on a Tuesday afternoon when everything still feels heavy. That's where people tend to get stuck. Understanding and embodiment are different things. You can see what is happening and still find yourself in the same patterns because this isn't conceptual. It's something that you learn in real time. For some brains, this lands harder. If you already struggled with structure, initiation, follow through, like most neurodivergent folks do, the system wasn't just oppressive, it was also functional. It was carrying your executive function load. The church ran your time, it reduced your decisions, it provided cues. You did not have to generate that internally. You knew where you were going, what you were doing, and what success looked like. So when that left, the load didn't leave, it just had nowhere to land. This is where people start thinking, why is this so hard for me? And then eventually realize nothing new broke. The system that was holding things together is just gone. And sometimes that's when people realize my brain has always worked this way. It was just being supported. And if that lands for you, this was never a moral failure. It was just a mismatch. This is not failure. It's scaffolding that was holding up your whole life, disappearing without replacement. The path forward is not discipline. It's not willpower. You are not just lacking discipline, as you might have always been told and you might be telling yourself. It is building internal regulation slowly through decisions, revisions, and lived experience. And this is where a quieter question shows up. Okay, but what do I actually do with this? Not in theory, in your actual life. So, before before I move into questions, I want to name something directly. If this lands, two things usually happen. The first is relief, things make sense, the shame loosens, and the second is quieter. Okay, so great. I know that I had scaffolding holding up my life, making my decisions, managing my time, and now it's gone. But what do I do about that? And that's the work that I do, is not fixing it. And I don't give you a system, but sitting with you inside one real situation and working through it, because this doesn't shift through understanding alone. It shifts through practice. And practice is much harder to do in isolation. I offer a 30 or a 90-minute reset call or a session called the Clarity Reset, where you bring one stuck point and we work through it together. And I'm going to drop that in the chat for anybody that might want that. Let's see. Mm, 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 mm. Okay. Are there any questions that I can answer about that? What makes this a lot harder is growing up in the church, especially as a neurodivergent people or person, you have a lot of messaging going on that we've done a lot of interpreting things about ourselves by the cues that we picked up from other people, right? So most of us feel that we're really inconsistent. We might even feel that we're lacking in faith, right? Or, things that, or lazy. That's another one that I hear a lot. And this is where it gets a little confusing, because you've got this church that you feel like you're showing up as a failure because you are, everybody in church is talking about reading their scriptures every day, getting to the temple every week or every month, and doing all of these things that we're supposed to do. And we can't remember to do our visiting teaching. And we, forget to pray in the morning, and we remember at night, and we grovel and we repent a whole lot, but, and so we're interpreting those things, those perceived failures as moral failures, and we're seeing ourselves as not faithful and good enough. And that's why we're expecting, when that goes away, everything's going to feel so much better, and it does, because no longer are we interpreting that as moral failures. No longer are we thinking that, we're not doing what we need to spiritually, and we're a spiritual failure. But, we never had to learn how to make big decisions, right? We were told. We didn't ever have to manage what we want our life to look like, what we want our month to look like, what we want our week to look like. That was done for us. And so a lot of those things, even though the church, created a sense of failure that we took with us all the time, it at least was managing things for us. So then, if you don't know about the identity damage that was done while you were in the system, and you leave the church and suddenly you just don't even have those basic skills, then you've got, that executive function crash and the identity damage piled on top of each other, at the same time. And so a lot of it is just recognizing, and like I said, as that shame loosens and we learn what parts are just our brain function, are just the kind of brain function that we have, and that doesn't say anything morally about us, and create our own executive function scaffolding in our lives. That's where you really start to see some progress and some movement, and start to build the confidence and internal authority that really, you know, helps you get closer to your goals and create the life that um, that you want. And so that's what I do in my sessions. But also, my Substack link is in my bio, and I do talk about this a lot there. There are a lot of free tools there, as well as in my videos. But a lot of the messages that I get from people a handful of years out of the church, as more and more things in your brain are loosening and shifting, is, I don't even know what to do with my life. For some reason, like my job doesn't fit now. You know, there's a lot of executive function collapse that happens because like I said, those decisions were always pre-made for you. And one thing people don't realize is just how many decisions we make in a given day. Um, and so your prefrontal cortex, that's in charge of all of that decision making, you get about so much juice in there for a day. And a lot of us are using that by 9 a.m. because we're used to having so many decisions made for us. And all of a sudden, everything is a decision. I don't know what I want. I don't know what's important. And so then the rest of the day, that system is exhausted. And there's still too many decisions to be made and just not enough already pre-built in. So, a lot of this is just slowly creating that system to take the pressure off your brain. Your brain needs to have um, a lot of those decisions pre-made and systems built in that are predictable. Consistency is really hard for us, right? But what ADHD people have in spades, and neurodivergent people, or just any of us, um, is going to be persistence. And so instead of relying on consistency, you're going to show up at the same time every day and do this thing, which most of us are not going to do. We build systems around persistence, which is something that we're really, really good at. If things are important to us, we harness that hyper focus that comes and goes, and we don't wait for motivation to show up. And so, like I said, that's what I do in the clarity sessions. I have a coaching group where we work through creating this system kind of from scratch. But in the clarity session, we just show up and you have one area, one thing that's a major problem. And we kind of tackle that one thing and create a system and learn the system of creating a plan that takes into account the areas that you struggle, areas that are hard, that are causing you stress right now, or where you feel inconsistent. And we create some kind of plan, and then we create a built-in, we expect failure because it's not failure, right? It's um, failure, what we usually interpret as failure, is just information. It's information about what works for us, information about what doesn't work for us. So when we create a plan, it's built in, or it has a built-in revision system where we take any failures and we revise and reiterate and then collect more information. And that's really the way that neurodivergent people are going to create a plan that works for them. Is it's going to include a lot of what you have always interpreted as failure, and a lot of reiteration and and moving forward. And I also have some tools on my website. I think that link is in my bio too. That can help you through a lot of that, like revising and collecting data. Anyway, I did want to still leave some time for questions if anybody has any questions specifically about anything that you're struggling with that are along these lines. Okay, I had some notes. No questions. Sometimes people have a question in mind and don't want to type it up. So, and that's completely fine. So I thought I'd throw out some, if that is the case, some questions that I hear often. One thing is, I can understand all of this and what you're saying, but why can I still not get these basic things done? And if that feels familiar to you, you are definitely not the only one. And let's see. Okay. And so like I said, that is a lot of that is just too much demand on your brain in any given day, right? When we're starting from scratch and we have a blank slate of a week and a pile of demands and a lot of decisions that are having to be made, this is one of the things we're not recognizing is that load is about 10 times heavier on your brain than you've ever had before. And frankly, nobody is doing that kind of work successfully. Most people have had a lifetime of building in systems and working through their values and having to make these choices over time. So I would say the biggest issue there is just not realizing the cognitive load that you are carrying when your whole framework just falls away. So step one is going to be recognizing that that is too much, that it is too heavy, and that the reason that you're having collapse, so you're getting stuck and feeling paralyzed, is because it's too much to expect for your brain to manage all of that with systems running in here. And that getting all of those decisions, your schedule, your calendar externalized and outside of your brain is going to be the key to being able to move forward with that. Also, a lot of us that are struggling with feeling paralyzed or unmotivated, it's not really about motivation, and it's not really about not wanting to do the thing, and it's not really about being too tired. Task initiation is its own skill, and most of us never had to learn that because we are used to pushing things off until the last second, and the thing that gets us to initiate it is we are now at deadline. And then we go into hyper focus and we make it happen. We can make it happen, right? We're going to pull off a miracle. And task initiation is a skill that can be learned. Usually it has to do with just having some clarity. Ambiguity shuts us right down. If we're not super clear on what needs to be done, what's the starting place, and those details, then it's pretty much impossible to get started. So that's another thing that we can work on in a clarity session is breaking down something, it's some kind of task where you feel stuck, something where you can't see the way forward. And just kind of, I always think of it as like a ball of yarn where we're just trying to find the end. If you're a knitter like I am, sometimes it's really hard to find the end to start, and you're digging around in that skein of yarn forever trying to find the thread. And as soon as you find that beginning spot and you have that clarity all the way through, then it's one step at a time. And then it's doable and it's easy. But a lot of it is just, that clarity and finding a path forward to initiate the task. So anyway, I guess I'm going to wrap up unless anybody has any questions. I'm not seeing anything. Awesome. Well, thanks for those who joined me. And this recording will be available for 48 hours. And you know where to find me. Feel free to email. Find my Substack for lots more free content, like I said. And then there's a lot of free stuff or workbooks and that kind of thing on my website that help with specifically these processes. So thanks for joining me.